The challenge. The HFY Empire had conquered over 100 worlds. They were the supreme power of the galaxy, their fleet unmatched, their armies feared. When they turned their attention to Earth, they expected the same result: fear, surrender, and obedience. But humans were different. A massive HFY warship loomed above Mars, broadcasting its message across the Sol system. Its commander, High Lord Vectal, stood tall, his golden armor gleaming under the artificial lights of his command bridge. His voice was deep, powerful, and filled with confidence. "Humans of Earth," he announced, "your existence has been tolerated long enough. You will surrender your fleet, your planet, and your lives to the HFY Empire. Resist, and you will be destroyed." The message was sent, reaching Earth's fleet stationed near Jupiter. Admiral Kane, commander of the United Earth Defense Fleet, watched the transmission from his flagship, the UES Valiant. His crew remained silent, waiting for his response. A challenge like this, coming from a species that had never lost a war, would terrify most civilizations. But Kane, he simply smirked. "Send our response," he said. The communications officer, a young lieutenant with an amused look on her face, nodded and pressed a single button. Across the galaxy, in front of the entire HFY War Council, on every fleet monitor, and to every soldier of the Empire, a simple image appeared: a grinning human face. The message was clear. Vectal stared at the screen in shock. He turned to his officers. "What is this?" One of his advisors, a thin HFY with dark green skin, hesitated before answering. "It's a human expression. A grin." Vectal's glowing yellow eyes narrowed. "What does it mean?" The advisor gulped. "It means they are not afraid." Silence filled the bridge. Then, anger. Vectal slammed his fist onto the control panel. "Not afraid," he hissed. "No one defies the HFY Empire. No one mocks us." He turned to his fleet. "Prepare the invasion force. We will make them fear us." Laughter echoed through the command deck. The Grin message had been sent, and now all they had to do was wait. Captain Reynolds, Kane's second-in-command, shook his head with a grin of his own. "That'll piss them off." Kane leaned back in his chair, watching the tactical map. Red markers, representing the HFY fleet, were moving aggressively toward Earth's outer defenses. "That's the point," Kane said. "They're used to fear. They don't know what to do when someone isn't scared of them." The HFY thought this was a battle. The humans knew it was a game. "Status on the fleet?" Kane asked. A tactical officer replied. "All ships are in position. Defensive formations are active. We're ready." Kane nodded. "Good. Let them come." The HFY advance. The HFY warships moved quickly, their sleek black hulls reflecting the light of the distant sun. They were the best the Empire had to offer. Unbeatable, invincible. Their weapons could tear through planetary defenses in seconds. And yet, something felt wrong. Vectal watched the battle screens. The humans weren't panicking. They weren't scrambling their forces. Instead, they were waiting. It was unnerving. Then something even more disturbing happened. A message came through. It was another image, sent directly to his command console. It was the same grinning human face. Vectal's hands clenched into fists. "These creatures dare mock us." His anger turned into rage. "All ships, advance. Destroy their fleet. Burn their planet if you have to. Make them suffer." The HFY fleet surged forward, weapons charged, engines roaring. On the human side, Admiral Kane simply smiled. He looked at his crew. "All right, ladies and gentlemen. Time to show them why humanity is the most dangerous species in the galaxy." As the HFY ships entered Earth's defense zone, a single human pilot's voice echoed over open comms. "Welcome to the battlefield, HFY. Hope you brought extra ships. You're gonna need them." And with that, the war began. The Xilari war fleet moved with terrifying precision. Hundreds of their black, spear-like ships cut through the void of space, engines burning like cold fire. Their weapons hummed with energy, prepared to unleash destruction upon the humans who had dared to mock them. From the bridge of the Emperor's Wrath, High Lord Vectal watched with cold satisfaction. His golden armor reflected the dim lights of the command deck as he folded his clawed hands behind his back. "This will be over soon," he said, his voice laced with confidence. A young officer turned from his console. "My lord, we have reached firing range." Vectal's eyes gleamed. "Fire a warning shot. Let them know what's coming." Aboard the UES Valiant, Admiral Kane watched as a bright pulse of energy streaked across the void. It hit one of the outermost Earth warships, a smaller destroyer named the Ironclad. Silence followed. The Xilari expected chaos. They expected distress calls, panic, a desperate attempt to flee. Instead, they got something else. Over the open comms, a human voice spoke, casual, almost amused. That tickled. The bridge of the Emperor's Wrath fell silent. Vectal's eye twitched. "What?" Then, another voice, another human. "Sir, was that supposed to hurt? 'Cause our shields didn't even flicker." Laughter echoed through the human fleet. Vectal's claws dug into the armrest of his throne. Increase power. Fire again. Another shot. This time, the energy blast hit directly against the shields of the UES Valiant. The ship rocked slightly, but the lights remained steady. Shields at 97%. Barely a scratch. Kane leaned forward, rubbing his chin. "Huh. That's disappointing." Vectal was fuming. "Send me a status report. Their ships should be burning." A Xilari officer hesitated before speaking. "My lord. Their technology. It's absorbing our energy weapons. Our scans indicate adaptive shielding. It adjusts after every impact." Vectal's blood ran cold. That was impossible. No species had ever countered Xilari weaponry so efficiently. Then, something unthinkable happened. One of the human ships disappeared. Not cloaked. Not destroyed. Just gone. A phantom in the dark. Aboard the Valiant, a grin spread across Kane's face. "Looks like the Spectre is in position." The Spectre was one of Earth's most advanced warships, a prototype stealth cruiser equipped with experimental warp technology, unlike anything that Xilari had ever faced. Deep in the shadows of space, the Spectre reappeared, right behind the Xilari flagship. Inside the Emperor's Wrath, alarms screamed. "Unknown vessel detected." "It's..." Before the officer could finish, the Spectre fired. A precise, controlled shot. Not to destroy, but to disable. The blast struck the flagship's main reactor, shutting down power for 10 full seconds. In those 10 seconds, the mighty Emperor's Wrath, the most feared warship of the Xilari Empire, drifted helplessly. In those 10 seconds, the Xilari warriors, the conquerors of 100 worlds, felt something alien. Fear. Mind games begin. Vectal's claws trembled as the power surged back to life. His eyes darted to the screens. The human fleet had barely moved. They weren't attacking. They were waiting. A new message flashed across the Xilari War Council screens. Another human image. This time, it was a simple phrase. "Try again." Vectal's hands curled into fists. "They dare mock us." His second-in-command, General Xorin, swallowed hard. "My lord, this isn't just mockery." He turned, eyes wide with realization. This is psychological warfare. The humans weren't just fighting with weapons. They were playing a game. And the Xilari had just become the pieces. The Xilari fleet, once an unstoppable force, now stood paralyzed in the vastness of space. Their most powerful warship, the Emperor's Wrath, had just been disabled in a single strike. For the first time in their history, they had no response. High Lord Vectal sat on his throne-like command chair, his claws digging into the metal armrests. His golden armor felt heavier than before. He had led countless invasions, crushed 100 worlds. But never had an enemy simply toyed with them. A new message flickered on the main screen. The same grinning human face. Below it, just 2 words. Try again. The bridge was silent. The officers exchanged nervous glances. Some of them, battle-hardened veterans of the Empire, shifted uncomfortably. Vectel's voice was dangerously low. Are they mocking us? No one answered. They didn't need to. The answer was clear. A strange kind of enemy. On the other side of the battlefield, aboard the UES Valiant, Admiral Kane stretched in his chair, completely at ease. Any movement from the Xilari? He asked. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Harris, shook her head, a smirk on her lips. Nope. Just sitting there, probably wondering how the hell a lesser species just turned their flagship into a floating rock. Laughter rippled through the bridge. Kane allowed himself a small grin. They're not used to this. They're used to fear, Captain Reynolds added. Other species kneel, beg, surrender before they even fire a shot. Kane nodded. Yeah. But we're humans. He leaned forward, watching the tactical display. We don't fear war. We play with it. Reynolds chuckled. What's the next move, boss? Kane's grin widened. Let's see how much pressure they can handle before they break. The next strike. Back on the Emperor's wrath, a desperate attempt to restore order was underway. My lord, a auxiliary engineer reported, systems are back at full power, but... He hesitated. But what? Vectel growled. There's something inside our systems. Vectel narrowed his eyes. Explain. The engineer's hands shook as he expanded the data feed. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, but it wasn't auxiliary language. It was English. 3 words flashed across every console in the fleet. Knock, knock. Who's there? A beat of silence. Then, all at once, auxiliary targeting systems failed. Every ship in the fleet lost its ability to lock onto a target. Weapons became useless. For a full 30 seconds, the auxiliary fleet was effectively blind. The humans had hacked them. The breaking point. Vectel slammed his fist onto the console, rage boiling in his veins. How? No species has ever breached our security systems. General Xorin, his second-in-command, paled. This isn't just hacking, my lord. This is... He exhaled. This is a game to them. A new transmission came through. A voice, a human voice, echoed through the bridge of every auxiliary warship. It was casual, almost amused. Oh, hey there. Looks like you guys are having some technical difficulties. It was Admiral Kane. Vectel's claws tightened. You dare. Kane's voice interrupted him. Listen, I get it. You guys are supposed to be the big bad empire. Real scary. But here's the thing. A pause. Then, Kane's voice turned deadly serious. You have never fought humans before. The auxiliary officers stiffened. You came here expecting fear, Kane continued. You expected us to bow, to beg, maybe even surrender. Another pause. Then, a chuckle. But we're not built that way. Vectel's breathing grew heavy. His hands clenched into fists. We don't fear war, Kane said. We thrive in it. Vectel slammed the emergency command button. All ships, full retreat, get us out of here. But before he could finish, the screens flickered again. New text. Bright. Bold. Too late. The auxiliary fleet's engines shut down. They were trapped. And the humans were just getting started. The auxiliary fleet had never known fear. For centuries, they had crushed civilizations with ruthless efficiency, leaving behind nothing but obedience and silence. Their warships were engineered for dominance. Their warriors trained for absolute victory. Yet now, floating in the vast emptiness of space, trapped, blind, and helpless, They finally understood what it felt like to be prey. High Lord Vectal's breathing was ragged, his golden armor feeling cold against his skin. He watched the main battle screen as human warships, smaller but faster, darted through the void like hunting beasts. His own fleet, once a symbol of terror, sat motionless, their engines and targeting systems hijacked by some invisible force. The humans had turned the battlefield into a playground. And the Xelari were the toys. The first kill. Aboard the UES Valiant, Admiral Kane sipped his coffee, watching the Xelari fleet like a lion watching a herd of wounded prey. "Status?" he asked, voice calm. Lieutenant Harris smirked. "They're still locked out. Their engines are dead. Targeting systems fried. They're just floating." Kane nodded. "Good. Let's send them a reminder of what happens when you mess with Earth." He turned to tactical. "Commander Zhao, pick a target." A young officer's eyes gleamed. "With pleasure, sir." A moment later, a single human corvette, a small, agile warship, peeled away from the fleet. It twisted through space with surgical precision, dodging debris with an effortless grace that no Xelari pilot could ever match. Then it fired. A single kinetic round, moving at hypersonic speed, tore through the void. No energy blasts, no explosions, just pure, unstoppable force. The round punched straight through the hull of a Xelari destroyer, one of their smaller warships, but still the size of a city. The kinetic impact ripped through metal and flesh alike, turning the inside into a storm of fire and shattered bone. From the Xelari bridge, it was a horrifying sight. The destroyer didn't explode. It simply went silent, a lifeless husk, drifting in the void, its crew instantly dead. Aboard the Valiant, Kane took another sip of his coffee. One down. The Xelari's desperate counterattack. The loss of the destroyer shattered whatever pride the Xelari fleet had left. "This is impossible," General Xorin whispered, his claws trembling. "We are the Xelari Empire. We do not lose." Vectal's eyes burned with fury. "We're not lost yet." He turned to his remaining officers. "Find a way to override their interference. We need weapons, even if we have to manually fire them." His chief engineer scrambled through systems, bypassing corrupted code. "We can restore manual railgun control on 3 battleships, but targeting will be rough." Vectal bared his teeth. "I don't care. Fire everything we have." The 3 Xelari battleships, still locked out of their systems, manually aimed their railguns and fired into the darkness. Massive slugs of metal tore through space, aimed directly at the UES Valiant. Humans dodged death. And laugh about it. Alarms blared across the Valiant's bridge. "Enemy projectiles incoming," Harris shouted. Kane didn't panic. He simply grinned. "Helm." A young pilot, Ensign Kelly, cracked his knuckles. "Watch this." The Valiant dipped, not in a straight line, not in a slow turn, but with pure unpredictability. It juked sideways, then twisted downward, then spiraled like a leaf in the wind. The Xelari slugs tore past, missing by miles. On the Emperor's wrath, Vectal's jaw dropped. "That's not piloting," General Xorin muttered, horrified. "That's insanity." Kane's laughter echoed through the Xelari comms. "Really? That was your big move?" His voice was casual, even bored. "Come on, guys. We expected better." Then, another message flashed onto every Xelari screen. "Try harder. Human Marines strike." While the Xelari were still reeling, the real attack began. Human boarding pods, small, heavily armored capsules, launched from the fleet. They moved fast, too fast for the Xelari to intercept. Then, one by one, they slammed into Xelari warships. Inside each pod, elite human Marines grinned as the doors blasted open. "Time to introduce ourselves," Sergeant Diaz muttered, checking his rifle. The humans poured out, armored figures with sleek exosuits, advanced weapons, and a hunger for battle. Xilari warriors rushed to meet them, drawing plasma blades, roaring in fury. The humans. They laughed. A Xilari officer watched in horror as a human marine dodged a plasma strike with unnatural reflexes, then countered with a brutal punch to the alien's throat. The warrior collapsed instantly. Another human slid under an enemy's legs, spun, and fired a single round into the back of its head. The Xilari, trained to fight brave but predictable enemies, had never faced an opponent so fast, so adaptive, so utterly ruthless. Within minutes, multiple Xilari ships were overrun. And the humans, they were still smiling. The fear sets in. On the Emperor's wrath, the Xilari officers watched the chaos unfold. This wasn't a battle. It was a hunt. And they were the prey. Vektal's breath was shallow. He had never seen warriors like this, never seen a species so unshaken by war. The humans fought like they were having fun. "They're demons," one of his officers whispered. Vektal swallowed hard. No, they weren't demons. They were worse. They were human. And they were winning. The Xilari Empire had ruled through fear for centuries. Their fleets crushed resistance before it could form. Their warriors inspired terror before a single shot was fired. Entire species had surrendered at the mere arrival of a Xilari warship. But now, for the first time in their history, the predators were the ones panicking. High Lord Vektal stood frozen on the command deck of the Emperor's Wrath, his claws digging into his golden armor. Around him, his officers scrambled in desperation, their voices filled with something alien. Fear. The human fleet hadn't even unleashed its full firepower. They had crippled the Xilari fleet, toying with them, and now their soldiers were butchering Xilari warriors inside their own ships. Vektal had never imagined a battle like this. He had never imagined humiliation like this. But worst of all, he had never imagined that a species could go to war and enjoy it. The Xilari crumble from within. Aboard the Xilari warship Doomfang, chaos ruled. The ship's captain, Lord Sarvik, had once boasted that a single Xilari warrior was worth 10 of any other species, that their kind was superior in strength, skill, and ruthlessness. Now, he watched in horror as his elite warriors were torn apart. The human marines moved like monsters, their exosuits boosting their speed and reflexes to terrifying levels. A Xilari warrior lunged with a plasma blade, only for a human to sidestep at impossible speed and plant a combat knife into his throat. Another tried to fire a plasma rifle, only for a human sniper to put a round through his skull before his finger even pulled the trigger. A hulking Xilari brute swung a massive war hammer, only for a human with a shock baton to dodge, roll under him, and break every bone in his leg with a single strike. Lord Sarvik took a step back, his hands trembling. This wasn't war. This was hunting. And his people were the prey. The psychological war intensifies. The Xilari weren't just losing the fight. They were losing their minds. Humans were using psychological warfare, unlike anything the Xilari had ever encountered. Throughout the Xilari fleet, human marines hacked into communication systems, flooding the enemy's channels with laughter, jokes, and eerie music. Some Xilari officers tried to reorganize their troops, but human hackers sent fake orders, leading entire squads into ambushes. The worst part, the messages. On every screen, on every Xilari warship, bright text flashed in their own language. "Boo! Are you scared yet? We are," followed by a laughing emoji. One ship received a single message. "Knock knock." The captain, confused, hesitated before responding. "Who's there?" The human reply came instantly. "Not your reinforcements." Then the ship exploded. The desperate gamble. Back on the Emperor's Wrath, Vektal's breathing was ragged. He turned to his second-in-command, General Zoran. We must surrender." Zoran's eyes widened in shock. "My lord, the Empire does not. The Empire is dying in front of us. Vectol snapped, his voice filled with something he had never allowed himself to feel. Panic. We cannot win this fight. We cannot beat them. He turned his gaze toward the tactical display, showing their fleet falling apart. The humans have already won. Zoran clenched his fists. Then we do the only thing left. Vectol narrowed his eyes. And what is that? Zoran's voice was cold. We take as many of them with us as we can. The last stand. A sudden surge of energy ran through the Xilari fleet. One by one, their warships powered back up, overriding human interference with brute force code injections. The humans immediately noticed. "Sir," Harris shouted on the Valiant's bridge. "The Xilari just powered up all remaining ships. They're charging their main cannons." Kane exhaled. So they're making their final move. The Xilari fleet, beaten and humiliated, had one last trick. They were overloading their reactors, preparing to turn each warship into a massive bomb. They would die, but they would take the humans with them. Admiral Kane watched the tactical display, then smiled. "Cute," he muttered. "Too bad we already saw this coming." He turned to his weapons officer. "Commander Zhao." Zhou grinned. "Oh, I'm way ahead of you, sir." The final blow. Across the battlefield, human ships moved at once, coordinating with impossible precision. They fired one synchronized strike, a perfectly timed and calculated volley of kinetic rounds, EMP bursts, and plasma torpedoes. Each shot found its target. Each shot hit exactly where it needed to. Within seconds, the Xilari warships, already teetering on the edge of destruction, shattered like glass. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions rippled across the void as the Xilari fleet was erased from existence. Aboard the Valiant, Kane leaned back, watching the burning wreckage drift into the abyss. Harris turned to him. "That's it. We've wiped them out." Kane nodded. "Good." Then, after a moment, he frowned. No sign of the Emperor's wrath. The escape. High Lord Vectol sat in the shadows of his escape shuttle, staring at the void where his invincible fleet had once stood. He had lost. No, not lost. He had been utterly defeated. And the worst part, the humans had made it look easy. As his shuttle activated its warp drive, Vectol closed his eyes, his mind burning with a single thought. We thought we were the apex predators. We were wrong. Humanity is something far worse. And the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The Xilari fleet was gone. What had once been an unstoppable armada now existed only as burning wreckage drifting through space, a graveyard of shattered warships and silent warriors. And yet, one ship had escaped. The Emperor's Wrath, flagship of High Lord Vectol, had vanished into the darkness, slipping away in the final moments of battle. Aboard the UES Valiant, Admiral Kane stared at the tactical display, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp. "They ran," he murmured. Lieutenant Harris folded her arms. "Yeah, but where to?" Kane exhaled, tapping a finger against the console. "They're going home. The chase begins." Across the battlefield, human ships had already begun cleanup operations. Xilari prisoners were being rounded up. Wreckage was being scanned for intelligence. But Kane, he was focused on one thing. "We're not done yet," he said, standing. "Helm, plot a pursuit course." Captain Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "You want to chase them into their own territory?" Kane smirked. "Why not? They came to our doorstep thinking they could win." He gestured toward the burning remains of the Xilari fleet. "Now we show them what happens when you knock on humanity's door uninvited." Inside the Emperor's Wrath, the atmosphere inside the Xilari flagship was thick with fear. The surviving officers, many of them battle-hardened veterans, sat in silence. Some were wounded. Others simply couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Vectol stood at the center of the bridge, his claws gripping the railing. His golden armor was dented, stained with the blood of his own men. He had never felt this before. helplessness. He turned to his navigation officer. Status. The officer swallowed hard. We are en route to the homeworld, my lord. But... Vectal narrowed his eyes. But what? The officer hesitated. They are following us. The bridge went silent. Then, whispers. No, a warrior muttered. That is impossible. No species would dare chase us into our own empire. Vectal's jaw clenched. But deep inside, he already knew. The humans would. Of course they would. Humanity's new game. Aboard the Valiant, Kane watched the Xilari ship's trajectory. They're running scared, Harris said, shaking her head. They're supposed to be the apex predators, and they're running like rabbits. Kane chuckled. Predators don't run unless they know they're outmatched. The Xilari homeworld, the heart of their empire, was still weeks away at maximum warp, but Kane had no intention of waiting that long. We're not just following them, he said, his grin widening. We're going to make them feel hunted. The plan was simple. Step 1. Disrupt their journey. Step 2. Break their morale. Step 3. Destroy them on their own doorstep. Kane leaned forward. Prepare the next strike. Terror in the void. 2 days into their retreat, the crew of the Emperor's Wrath began experiencing something new. Paranoia. It started small, strange readings on sensors, a flicker on the edge of the radar. The feeling that they were being watched. Then came the ghost signals. Every so often, a human transmission would break through their communications, brief, distorted, but undeniably there. Still running. A voice whispered through the speakers. The Xilari froze. The message repeated. Still running. Vectal slammed his fist against the console. Shut it down. The comms officer scrambled to isolate the signal, but it wasn't coming from anywhere specific. It was everywhere. Impossible, the officer whispered. There. Then the lights flickered, and across every screen on the bridge, new words appeared. Boo. The entire crew jumped. Vectal's breathing was heavy. He could hear the whispers of his own men. They're playing with us. They could have attacked by now. Why haven't they? Because they don't need to. Because they're enjoying this. And then, boom. The ship lurched violently, alarms screaming through the halls. An explosion had rocked the outer hull. They hit us. A tactical officer shouted. Direct strike. No warning. No signature. Vectal's claws trembled. How? Then, a new message flashed across the screen. Peekaboo. Breaking the Empire's spirit. For the next 3 days, the Emperor's Wrath was hunted like an animal. Every time the Xilari tried to jump to a new system, a human warship was already there, waiting. Sometimes they attacked. Sometimes they just watched. And that was worse. Why won't they finish us? A Xilari officer snarled, his voice cracking. Vectal had no answer. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The humans weren't rushing this. They were taking their time, enjoying it. And worse, they were making sure the Xilari knew it. The final blow. By the time the Emperor's Wrath limped into Xilari space, the crew was broken. Vectal's once proud warriors had become shadows of themselves, paranoid and exhausted. Some had even whispered about surrendering. Then, as the homeworld finally appeared on the horizon, their sensors detected something that made Vectal's blood run cold. The humans were already there, waiting. The UES Valiant and an entire human fleet hovered above the Xilari capital world, waiting for them. No threats, no ultimatums, just a message broadcast to every Xilari citizen, soldier, and leader across the planet. It was Admiral Kane's voice, calm and amused. Well, you made it home. A pause. Shame it won't be yours for much longer. Vectal's hands shook, and for the first time in his life, he felt true terror. The humans had won. And now, they were coming for everything. The Xilari homeworld had never known war. For centuries, it had stood as the heart of an empire built on fear and dominance. Its cities stretched across continents, gleaming spires piercing the sky. The Xilari themselves, proud, ruthless, and undefeated, had never imagined a day when warships would appear in their skies. But now, humanity was here, and the Xilari finally understood what it meant to feel small. High Lord Vektal stood on the balcony of the Imperial Citadel, overlooking the capital. He could see them, human warships, hovering in low orbit, casting shadows over the once proud city. Their presence alone sent shockwaves through the population. Xilari warriors filled the streets, scrambling into defensive positions, their weapons shaking in their hands. Civilians whispered in hushed, terrified tones, because they had all seen the message. You made it home. Shame it won't be yours for much longer. Vektal turned away from the view, his claws tightening into fists. Behind him, his generals and advisors stood in silence, their faces filled with something alien to them, doubt. We still have planetary defenses, General Xoran said, his voice strained. Our cannons can hold them back. Vektal exhaled slowly. No, they can't. Zoran's jaw clenched. You would have us surrender. Vektal turned to face him, his golden armor battered and cracked from the battle before. His eyes, once filled with unshakable confidence, were now haunted. Surrender, he whispered. Do you think the humans came all this way for a negotiation? Xoran hesitated. Vektal shook his head. No. They came to finish us. And outside, in the sky above, humanity prepared to do just that. The first attack came with no warning. A single kinetic strike, a metal rod the size of a skyscraper, dropped from orbit at terminal velocity. The impact was instantaneous. The Imperial Fortress, a structure that had stood for 1,000 years, was reduced to a smoldering crater in the blink of an eye. A symbol of Xilari power, erased as easily as a child brushing sand off a table. The entire planet felt the shockwave. And then the real attack began. The sky burns. The Xilari defended with everything they had. Planetary shields flickered to life. Anti-air cannons roared, filling the sky with plasma bursts. Fighters launched in swarms, desperate to push back the invaders. But humanity had already planned for this. Xilari fighters were fast, but human eye-assisted targeting systems made them irrelevant. A dogfight that should have lasted hours was over in minutes. Ground-based cannons turned to the skies, only for human cyber warfare teams to hack their systems, forcing them to fire on their own cities. And then, the drop pods came down, boots on the ground. Across the capital, metal pods slammed into the streets, doors exploding outward. And out stepped the demons of the void. Human soldiers, clad in advanced combat armor, moved with terrifying precision. Xilari warriors, trained from birth in the art of war, rushed to meet them. They never stood a chance. Humanity didn't just fight. They dominated. Their weapons cut through Xilari armor like paper. Their exosuits made them faster, stronger, and deadlier than any warrior that Xilari had ever seen. The battle wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. Vektal watched from the citadel, his mind racing. They had no way to win this. The planet was falling. His empire was dying. And the worst part, the humans were enjoying themselves. The final transmission. Vektal turned to his last remaining officers. There is only one thing left to do, he said. General Xoran nodded solemnly. We must send a message. Together, they activated the planet-wide transmission system, broadcasting across all frequencies. Vektal took a slow breath. Then, for the first time in Xilari history, he spoke the words that no one had ever dared to utter. This is High Lord Vektal of the Xilari Empire. We surrender. A pause. The city outside was still burning. The screams of warriors and civilians alike filled the air. And then, the response came. It was Admiral Kane's voice. Calm, controlled, but amused. Surrender, he repeated. That's cute. Silence. Then, laughter. Cold, unforgiving, human laughter. And with those final words, the truth became clear. Humanity had never come here for a surrender. They had come to end the Xilari. And that's exactly what they were going to do. Within hours, the capital fell. Within days, the last Xilari strongholds collapsed. And within weeks, the Xilari Empire ceased to exist. Their once mighty warriors, hunted down. Their cities, burned to the ground. And the survivors, those who were lucky enough to survive, they would never forget what had happened here. Because now, the galaxy knew the truth. The Xilari had thought themselves the predators. They had thought humanity would be just another prey species to conquer. They had been wrong. Humanity wasn't prey. They weren't even predators. They were something far worse. And now, the galaxy would never be the same again.